Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love these watches, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com. For purchase and pricing, everything you see here is for sale. Names, prices when available, and references in the description below. And remember, I am also buying watches. Sell me a watch. We're stocking up for the holidays, and we're entering the home stretch, paying the highest prices of the year. One watch or an entire collection, no upper limit on value. Once again, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com to buy, trade, or sell. Let's get started with one of the most notable ultra haute de gamme pieces of 2020. The Grübel Forsey Balancier S Sport in titanium. 18 pieces, 43 millimeters, grade 5 titanium case, as well as movement. We're talking world's best level of finishing, and we're talking 100 meters of water resistance with an integrated rubber strap. Robert Greubel and Stephen Forsey out of La Chaux-de-Fonds build about 100 to 120 watches a year, and that's actually as many employees as they have. So the low ratio of watches to employees is due to the level of finishing of these watches. Inside and out, we're talking a level of attention to detail that is surpassing, inventive, and many consider it to be avant-garde, unique, and the best available. Now, granted, this is far from Philippe Dufour in style, but the same small measures, beveling, sharp interior angles, black polishing, combinations of textures, tones, different planes, change of surfacing, all of that is present on these watches, and you can see the references to history. These titanium bridges and plates, grade 5, feature a combination of interior frosting, raised exterior polishing, and then mirrored beveling on their edges. All of the screw heads are black polished with chamfered slots and circumference, and you can see golden chaton holding the individual pivot rubies. Now, the watch does feature an extraordinary amount of movement to enjoy. The caliber features a 30-degree inclined balance of enormous proportions with recessed bolts for aerodynamic efficiency. It is free-sprung for toughness, and it uses a Phillips overcoil profile so that it keeps outstanding time in any orientation with respect to gravity. You can also see the depth of this dial with a power reserve indicator tracing the 3 days of manual wind power reserve, and an enormous arcing titanium grade 5 bridge that locates both the motion works as well as the cannon pinion and the hands. Now, you can see there are several different levels of finishing here, as we have black polish, we have satination, we also have a lovely satin graining across the individual wheels. The wheels have chamfered spokes and inner circumference. Again, no compromise here. Everything is the best available. The watch is nominally 43 millimeters in diameter. We'll take a quick look at the deployant clasp that comes with it. But it's really only 45 millimeters from lug to lug. So while it's a large watch, it's anything but overpowering. This is as good as it gets. You can absolutely swim with this watch. I rarely make that recommendation with Richard Mille timepieces, but this is designed for aquatic enjoyment. Frankly, this is designed for enjoyment anywhere. Even with the 20 power loop, you are not going to find mistakes on this dial or that case back. This is something approaching the best available. Philippe Dufour, Romain Gauthier, Chronometrie Fernand Berthoud, and of course Greubel Forsey. They are all among the finest in the upper echelon of high horology. Now, let's talk about another independent, one that was actually a pioneer in the space. Daniel Roth, founded in 1989 by the eponymous watchmaker, created a number of early, significant, and pioneering independent references. Prior to purchase by Hourglass Holdings and then laterally Bulgari, Daniel Roth pushed the limits of case design, movement design, and invention. As you can see, this is the Master chronograph. This model retailed after the year 2000, but it is emblematic of the Daniel Roth innovations of the 90s, starting with the Ellipso Curvex case, which you can see is very unconventional in its form. Now, it's about 38 millimeters across, 45 millimeters from end to end, and it's fairly thin as well. I'll throw it on my wrist real quick so you can get a sense of its size and its stance. It's not a huge watch. As you can see, it's relatively low and it will fit underneath the cuff. Now, this is the DR101 movement, so while some Daniel Roth watches use customer calibers from high-end suppliers, this one is all Daniel. Now, the timepiece is still serviceable at Bulgari in the Vallée de Joux. So if you wonder how you attain service and parts for a watch like this, Bulgari is still the servicing agent for both this and Gerald-Genta. So you get a rare confluence of major group support and independent watch cool. Now getting a little bit closer, you can see that caliber DR101, 38 jewels over 400 pieces, and it has a dial side column wheel and lateral clutch. The beveling is immaculate. The satination on the steel components of the chronograph, world class. As you can see, there are both fired blue and black polished screws, and it is a modern chronograph as it features a quick set, hacking seconds, a 4 Hz beat rate, and remarkable depth from any angle. This open dial allows you to fully appreciate the watch's mechanism. It does, of course, have a manual wind power reserve. It's 36 hours, so you're going to want to wind it daily, but the feel of the column wheel and the look of the column wheel are among the finest I've ever experienced. You can see those hands at center fired blue over a remarkably deep movement, and from any angle, the DR101 is a masterpiece. A great watch, a truly emblematic case design, an inventive manufacture movement, and guaranteed rarity from one of the true pioneering independents of our age. Daniel wrote, by the way, still in practice, and while you can and probably should send the watch to Bulgari, he does still take in his old watches for work if you ever need the hand of the master. Now, jumping back to Geneva, the true home of Swiss watchmaking, and of course the giant of Geneva is Rolex. This is the Rolex Datejust Turn-O-Graph in its final generation. This is the 116264 blue metallic sunburst dial, all red date disc. It's not actually a roulette. The Turn-O-Graph, originally referenced 6202 in the early 1950s, was the first series production Rolex watch to feature a rotating bezel, and initially it was viewed as an aviator or traveler's watch. It gained the nickname Thunderbird after the U.S. Air Force Aerobatic Demonstration Squadron, nicknamed Thunderbirds, adopted the early Turn-O-Graph as service issue. Now the watch has a white gold bidirectional rotating aviator's bezel that can line up with the minute hand for a quick impromptu timer. You have white gold hands, white gold Rolex crown, white gold indices, and it is a 36mm watch, chronometer certified, and 100 meters water resistant. There is plenty of lume. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And when you throw it on the wrist, it looks right, it feels right. It is right. This is my favorite Datejust by far. It's a sportier Datejust. It's a great way to get into rotating bezel Rolex sports watches if you have a smaller wrist, a taste for tradition, or you just want the one that everyone else doesn't have. This is a truly scarce reference. It went out of production in about 2011, so not only was it a minority of Datejusts even in its day, but it is no longer available new, making it a truly special piece. And with the red accents and the blue dial, the white gold and the steel combo, this is the Datejust to own. We'll throw Daniel Roth on the wrist one more time so you can get one last look at how that fits. The epitome of elegance. Okay, we're not done with Rolex though. This is part of my favorite family of Rolex sports watches. As much as I love the Turn-O-Graph, I adore the Milgauss. And few Milgauss models are as emotional or exuberant as the GV, the Glace Vert, the green crystal. This model came out back in 2007, the 116400, 40 millimeters in stainless steel, 100 meters water resistant, chronometer certified. It is all that, and it is 80,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetic minimally. But what really set this watch apart was the combination of the green crystal, the heritage-inspired lightning bolt seconds hand, the use of effusive and exuberant orange on a Rolex dial, and even in the Luminova grade employed, they use some orange Luminova. This really sets the watch apart from other Rolex timepieces and sets it apart really from the character of the Rolex brand. If you think the subs, the GMTs, and the Daytonas just take themselves too darn seriously, this is going to be the Rolex for you. As you can see, with a fixed bezel and a relatively compact case, this is a Rolex for a reasonably sized wrist. You don't have to be a big boy to wear this one with panache, and you can see it is low enough to fit underneath the cuff. Also, along with the Air King 116900, it has a unique quality in that the lug-to-lug span is almost the same as the end-link to end-link span. So this is a watch that wears relatively short across the wrist compared to the other 40mm Rolex watches. And we may as well do a lume shot here. In case you're wondering what orange Luminova looks like, it's very similar to conventional Luminova, but a little bit darker, not much. You can see Rolex principally using its Chromolite lume on this dial. This watch is all Rolex, right down to the lume paint they use. We'll do a few more. Returning with Grübel Forsey. And now bring in two high horology options online. Can you guess? Have you guessed? Let's find out. Two times Patek. Two of the handiest watches you can buy from Patek Philippe of Geneva. We talked about Rolex as the giant of Geneva. Well, Patek Philippe is undoubtedly the patrician. These two watches, the Nautilus annual calendar and the Nautilus travel time chronograph, offer maximum value for your Patek Philippe dollar. Let's start with the newer of the two. This model actually launched just last year. If you can see, it's the new 5726 1A with a lovely gradient blue dial, much like you'll find on the 5711. And these traditionally with gray dials, silver dials, now with the blue dial. This is the Dash 14 model. It's easily the liveliest, the most colorful, and in my opinion, the most fun. Now it's 40.5 millimeters in diameter, but it's still 120 meters water resistant. So you throw this annual calendar on your wrist and you realize you're getting a lot from Patek here. The annual calendar was invented by Patek in 1996, so the complication is uniquely Patek Philippe. And then the Nautilus was created by Gerald Genta for Patek Philippe 20 years prior to that in 1976. So you're getting the iconic complication in the iconic design and really no compromise. As you can see, it's not a big or bulky watch. It does slide easily underneath the cuff. It's a handsome looking watch with plenty of lume, and blink if you'll miss it, but there's a 24-hour indicator at the base of the dial so you know when not to use the calendar correctors at night. And then there's a moon phase in there that is accurate to over 120 years. Quickly turning the watch over. You can see that the movement is based on the 324, handsomely laid out, anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, ceramic rotor bearings, 45-hour power reserve, 6-position adjusted, and a Gyromax-style free-sprung balance. In addition to being quite comely, it is also quite accurate, as Patek guarantees this to no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day from the factory. And you can see from every angle the shine, the gloss, and the luminous appeal of a Patek Philippe movement. Not quite on the level of Grübel Forsey, but then again, you're not going to be spending quite Grübel Forsey money to get into this watch, and with better lume than the Grübel, a more practical complication than the Grübel, and frankly, more water resistance than the Grübel, you are actually getting more as a total package. I love the Grübel Forsey, but if you don't need the ultimate horological status symbol, and you have an eye for practicality, a Nautilus annual calendar is the way to go. Unless we're talking about the alternative, which is the Nautilus travel time chronograph. In my opinion, this is the best overall watch that Patek Philippe makes. Launched at Baselworld 2014, it replaced the 5980 by upgrading it in every way. It's 40.5 millimeters in stainless steel, just like the annual calendar, but it remains svelte at only 12.8 millimeters thick, in spite of the addition of a hideaway second time zone, AM/PM, that is day-night distinction for both your local and your reference time, which is quite unusual on travel time watches. They usually don't give you AM/PM for local time. Now, if you look at the top of the dial, which is beautifully balanced, there is a radial date indicator that's cued to the local time at center, and then down at 6 o'clock, a feature every chronograph should have, a minutes register that registers from 0 to 60 rather than 0 to 30. It is also a flyback chronograph, so you can reset and restart it with a single push of the trigger. No need to stop first. Look at how they integrated the travel time functionality into the watch, as the system is effectively cloaked by the winglet balance from side to side of the watch. At 9 o'clock, you don't even realize at first glance that these are pushers. Now, the timepiece also features a lovely gradient gray dial that fades from silver at its center to almost black at its edges. And inside it is the well-loved column wheel vertical clutch 55-hour power reserve. caliber 28-520 that first bowed back in 2006 on the Nautilus Chrono and the 5960 compound complication. This is a watch that still offers 120 meters of water resistance in spite of the fact that it does have quite a few case-through fittings, and you can see that only 12.8 millimeters thick, this does fit underneath the cuff. Remarkably, it's only half a millimeter thicker than the previous Nautilus 5980 chronograph. There is no compromise here, and at 40.5 millimeters in steel, it's a versatile size, it's a tough metal, it's a useful watch. If you're going to own just one watch and budget is not sensitive, this is the way to go because it fulfills almost every wish, from automatic winding to swimmability to nighttime loom to a travel complication to a timing mechanism separate from the time of day. It gives you all of that and the iconic Nautilus design, which by itself is a sales argument in favor of this watch. It will never look dated. We know that because it has endured since 1976. But if you want to take a chance with something that is so new as to be unique, then you want the Ressence Type 2 E-Crown. First shown as a prototype in 2018, the Type 2 is the first ever symbiosis, or perhaps we should use more of a mechanical term, a fusion of mechanical and electronic horology, as this timepiece features an internal microprocessor, though it is driven entirely by a mechanical movement. Perhaps I should explain more in depth. An ETA automatic base winds itself and drives the time. But there is also a mechanism called the E-Crown, which is an electromechanical module between the planetary display that Resence builds and the base movement that ETA builds. So this electronic system can be charged by mechanical means, that is the movement of the rotor, or it can be charged by solar means via shutters that open, expose photovoltaic cells, and energize the system. So there are 4 modes, and you can see that there are 4 different stations for the function selector. You tap the crown. This one's not charged up just yet, so I can't demonstrate yet. There will be an extensive demonstration video. But once it is charged up, you can use a Bluetooth mechanism to sync with your phone and set 2 time zones. One is your local, one is your alternate. By tapping on the crystal, you can put the watch in E-Crown mode, which will correct the time on request. You can put it in first time zone mode, second time zone mode, or you can put it into a Bluetooth mode in which you can set everything from your phone. Now there's more. Of course there's more. Because the E-Crown system has its own separate power supply, even if the watch runs down, it remembers the time. So when you pick the watch up again and you re-energize the movement by winding it, you just go into E-Crown mode, it resets the time. Moreover, in daily wear, once each day, the E-Crown system will reset the mechanical time correctly. So it doesn't drive the watch. What it does is it ensures that the watch is driven solely by the mechanical movement, but it is set, reset, and regulated on a daily basis by the quartz microprocessor. So the watch will run, even if the E-Crown system were removed, completely mechanical in its drive. But in terms of unerring precision, it gains from the presence of the E-Crown. Now there's more. If you leave the watch down for 12 hours or more, the E-Crown system will break the mainspring barrel, bring it to a stop, halt the watch, and then when you pick it up, it will release the mainspring barrel and reset the watch to the correct current time. It does all of this inside a 45 millimeter crown-free grade 5 titanium case. And as you can see, there is a lever on the reverse side with which you can set it and even wind it conventionally. You will note that it is a regulator and a planetary dial. Hours, minutes, and seconds are separate. Now the timepiece, of course, features extravagant loom, and I'm going to show that to you right now. Ressence loom really is industry best, and if you haven't seen these watches by night, you really don't know them. This watch has 2 time zones, an automatic resetting system, a power minder system, the ability to reset the watch after it's set for up to 3 months. This watch is a Swiss Army knife of capability, and once again, it is a purely mechanically driven watch that can function without the E-Crown module, so it is the best of both worlds. Let's talk options. Let's talk different price points. This is a 3,557 piece, 39 millimeter limited edition tribute for 2017, celebrating 60 years of the Omega Seamaster as a dive watch. Of course, the first Seamaster arrived in 1948, but was more of a water-resistant dress watch. This timepiece is the homage to the original Seamaster diver, which I believe was the 2913. The timepiece is 39 millimeters in diameter, and true to history, it has a sort of Fotina reference dial designed to evoke vintage radium. It has a broad hour hand. It has a bidirectional bezel. That broad arrow hour hand traces a quarter Arabic dial with a vintage Omega logo and marquee. And if you look very carefully, I'm going to do my best to show it, you can see they've recreated the little etched Omega logo under the crystal as featured on the plexiglass original, though this is sapphire. You'll also note that it's got a minimally beveled, relatively thin case band and lug set. It has a no-guard crown, as it is designed to be true to the form of the original. The bracelet is designed to look vintage, but when you get to the clasp, you realize, though it features a vintage logo, there are a couple on this watch, it is a modern clasp with a push-button slider allowing you to gain some incremental adjustment. And of course, the movement is a coaxial chronometer internally with a 55-hour power reserve. So the watch, as you can see on the wrist, considerably more compact than some of the other modern Seamasters. It really does look the part of a vintage reference, and in that regard, it's sort of the best of both worlds, as you get modern fit finish and water resistance, as well as that time-tested look that you know is going to be just as attractive in 50 years, because frankly, it's 60 years and counting. 63 years since this design originally broke, it still looks the business, and remarkably, it's one of the thinner Omega dive watches you're going to encounter, as this one will fit underneath the cuff. 3,557 pieces for 2017. This is not a regular production model in the Omega catalog. Now, turning the clock back to 2010, we're going to be high and dry at Circuit de la South and the Le Mans Classic. This is the Richard Mille RM10 Le Mans Classic. It is dedicated to the Richard Mille sponsored event that brings together vintage 24 hours of Le Mans endurance racing cars. The timepiece, of course, is fundamentally an RM10, but the main differences are the green chaptering on the dial, the RM10 Le Mans graphics with the checkered flag. Note that the checker is in green and white, not black and white. Then you have a 24-hour indicator, and you can see that it is keyed to the hand at center, so you know whether you're looking, for example, at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m., and you can see it's in the first 12 hours, this is 9 a.m. The movement is visible underneath. It's the RMA S7. It is a Vaucher-based 55-hour power reserve automatic winder, but customized highly for Richard Mille. This watch, which is part of a limited edition of 30, is white gold, and we'll take a quick look at that movement. The movement has bridges and plates made of titanium. They're also skeletonized to further evacuate mass. There's also a set of 4 rubber isolators that decouple the case from the movement to better brace against shock, and then the balance is free sprung. You can see the little Vaucher star logo to remind you who built the movement, but the standard Vaucher, I think it's a Vaucher 4000, does not look like this. This is highly customized for Richard Mille to make it tougher, a little bit more attractive, more overtly mechanical and industrial. And then if you look there, the variable inertia winglets on the rotor, these little gold masses can be moved in or out to increase or decrease the polar moment or turning force of the rotor, depending on your level of activity. Now, you throw it on the wrist, it's bigger than the RM5, but the RM10 is just not a huge watch, and that works to your advantage. It's about 47.7 millimeters from lug to lug, 13 millimeters thick, so you can note it is lower than you would expect given the rather boxy case form. And then from side to side, it is 39 millimeters. We want to be really precise, 38.9 millimeters. So this is a timepiece that wears well on a smaller wrist, in large part because it's short across the wrist, but also because if you look at it from the underside, it has a curvature that's rather cambered. It's bowl-shaped, so it wraps around the wrist, and you get a really nice, secure fit. We may as well do a loom shot of this because it is a sports watch designed for 24-hour races. And sometimes when you're running a 24-hour race, there are nighttime hours. So if you've got that graveyard shift in your Ford GT or your Porsche 908 at the Le Mans Classic, you will be able to read your Richard Mille RM10. You're flying through the collection today. All right, we're going to do independent brands and two very different complications. In my right hand, we have a third series, FP Journe Tourbillon Remontoir, a lovely 38mm platinum piece that is one of the first 100 tourbillon remontoir constructed. I can't tell you the exact serial number, but I can tell you it was one of the first 100, and the serial number corresponds. Now, the watch features a lovely dial. As you can see, it's a handsome golden matte hue with a little bit of varnish on top, as these early watches have an unexpectedly luminous and three-dimensional dial quality to them. You can see it features the flat remontoir cock of the third and fourth series, but it has the exceptionally large dial side bolts of the first three series, so it's not a series 4. If you take a close look too, you can see that it is handsomely decorated. These early FP Journe movements were more obviously handmade in ways that are a little bit rustic at times, but they are invariably beautiful because they are more visibly handmade than the somewhat more machine-assisted successors. The watch is nice and thin at under 10 millimeters thick and 38 millimeters. It wears really well on a smaller wrist. You can see that the bridge, or half bridge I should say, for the tourbillon is rounded and specular finished, all black polished. The same is true of the lovely filigree or wire style cage for the tourbillon, and then the cock for the remontoir is actually black polished there. It features a chronometer style power reserve that runs backwards, so when it's fully wound it indicates 0. It is a lovely tourbillon carriage, as you can see. I'm going to do my best because the light here is not doing me any favors, but you can see that it has a lovely hand-finished carriage that is fixed at 3 points surrounding a free-sprung overcoil hairspring. The free-sprung architecture is adjusted in 6 standard positions, and the overcoil is an uncommon feature for an FP Journe watch. You'll only see it on certain flagship pieces like the tourbillon remontoir and the chronomet optimum. Doing my best here to capture that tourbillon carriage, but it is a 1-minute tourbillon, beating away at 21,600 vibrations per hour. Of course, Eleanor French-made case, a discontinued feature. As of 2008, no more Eleanor cases would be built for FP Journe. He bought the factory and he moved it to Geneva. And you can see the movement caliber 1498, 14 being the size in French lean, 98 being the year work started on this movement. This is the original tourbillon remontoir movement with brass bridges coated in rhodium. And then you can see the linear spring, the remontoir d'égalité, that acts as a buffer between the barrel and the tourbillon. So the escapement is not driven directly by the barrel. The barrel energizes the remontoir spring. The remontoir spring, via a second escapement, discharges into the primary escapement that drives the tourbillon. So it's getting topped up with energy every 1 second. So for roughly the first 28 hours of power reserve, there is constant amplitude about the balance. This is an uncommon and exceptional horological achievement that allows the watch to be very regular and regulated very precisely. I'll throw it on the wrist real quick. This is a super collectible watch from FP Journe. If you're looking for something that represents vintage FP Journe, represents scarcity, represents one of the main currents in independent horology collecting, this is considered to be an important watch by an important watchmaker. And granted, the year 2001, 2, 3, 4, not vintage by Rolex or Omega standards, but definitely vintage by the standards of a company that only started making watches under its own name in 1999. And this is a real opportunity to own one of the most important pieces in its earliest form. Moser of Schaffhausen is only slightly younger than FP Journe, having been re-established. It's a great name from the 19th and 20th century in 2005. Now, since 2012, under the management of MELB Holdings, which includes several generations of Swiss watchmaking management talent. So Moser is one of the rising brands of our time. Out of Schaffhausen in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, they make about 1,500 watches a year, and this is the H. Moser & C. Endeavor Perpetual, and as you can see, it is a black edition watch with an extraordinary blackened titanium case, 40.8 millimeters, lovely rose gold accents on the dial. This is two-tone done right. The watch is super compact and light. At 48 millimeters lug to lug, it really sits nicely on a smaller wrist, and in titanium, it is feather light. If you like Journe watches, but you would rather just buy the movement without paying for the precious metal, this is the watch for you. The timepiece features a perpetual calendar designed by one of F.P. Journe's peers in the AHCI, which is like the cool kids club for independent watchmakers. Andreas Streller designed this perpetual calendar system, and I'll demonstrate how this works. There is a bidirectional setting system, so you can actually turn the perpetual calendar in both directions. And it has a center index, so 12 months corresponding to 12 hours, and that little index tells you your current month. You have an exceptionally large date that gives you the date, and then you have that little center index, super discrete, and backed by a case-back display of leap year cycle. So I'm going to get a little bit closer so you can see the movement. The movement is manual wind, and we're going to do our best with the light here. The movement is manual wind with twin mainspring barrels set in golden chaton fixed by black polished screws. It has a 7-day power reserve, though it will run for almost 9 when it dies. You can see there's a full balance bridge with a free-sprung index. It has a 14-karat gold escapement of Moser's own manufacture, and it's worth mentioning that through its subsidiary Precision Engineering, Moser makes its balance, its hairspring, its escapements, all of that. It's a true manufacturer. You can see the bridges have been beautifully blackened. They have an elaborate double-crested Côte de Genève wave pattern, and then all of the train jewels, like the barrels, are set in chaton to reference the 19th century era of Moser pocket watches, when this is how jewels would have been set into bridges and plates. You have a full balance bridge with a free-sprung index for toughness, and then there is an overcoil hairspring, so the watch, which is adjusted in 6 positions, will keep outstanding time in any of them. There's also a power reserve indicator on the dial, and if you pull the crown to extremity, it does have hacking or stop seconds. A very special watch, and I apologize for some of the smudges on the dial. The watch is in immaculate condition. My fingers betray the hardware. As you can see, simple matching titanium pin buckle and a lovely nubuck texture alligator leather strap, all in titanium, an incredibly sophisticated perpetual calendar by a rock star independent watchmaker from a rock star independent watch brand. Again, 1,500 Mosers per year. This one is exceptional, even by those standards. Now here's a watch that represents 150, made for the 2020 model year. This is the Zenith El Primero Chronomaster Revival Liberty Edition. 150 pieces, 37 millimeters in stainless steel, created for the U.S. market. The standout features here are the heritage case form, which can be traced right back to 1969 in some of the first El Primero models, and then a dial that features a sort of gradient fade, better associated, perhaps better known from Rolex watches. This is known as the vignette. It's a lot like Moser's Fume dial in that it's brighter at its center and then it fades to a lovely dark, almost navy blue at its edge. So a truly handsome dial with a lovely red, white, and blue motif that, if we're honest, works well with a large number of national flags. Heck, this might be the only thing Americans and Russians can agree on. Red, white, and blue is a great tricolor for a flag. But it also works if you're British, it also works if you're French, it also works if you're Dutch, meaning this is a universally beautiful watch that, if you wish, can represent many different patriotic traditions. Now, it does feature an El Primero caliber 400 on the reverse side, 50-hour power reserve, automatic winding, 10 beats per second, column wheel lateral clutch chronograph, and you can see that column wheel and lateral clutch in action. 50 meters water resistant. It has a lovely strap with an embossed sort of textile motif, though it is all leather, make no mistake. This is a calfskin strap. Throw it on the wrist, and the 37 millimeter case size is ideal. It wears well on almost any wrist. With a combination of satin and polish, it's attractive from any angle. And take note that the case is seamless on the top. The bezel and the case are all one piece. So there is a case back through which the dial and the movement are loaded. The seamless look on the front creates a handsome ingot-like aesthetic, as though the whole watch were hewn from a single solid piece. It is very attractive. Again, beating 36,000 vibrations per hour, it has a smoother chronograph seconds hand, and you can see that that chronograph seconds hand has a lovely candy stripe red and white motif. This is the El Primero movement in the Chronomaster Revival Liberty Edition, 150 pieces for 2020. And we finish with a sentimental favorite of mine. We're crossing the border to Saxony and a Lange Söhne, celebrating its 10th year as a revived brand and a growing standard of reference in the ultra haute de gamme segment. A Lange Söhne celebrated in the year 2000 its 10th anniversary with the Longamatic anniversary, also known as the Jubilee. This is a 36.9 millimeter, basically 37 millimeter watch, featuring a lovely combination of wearable size, 3/4 rotor automatic, platinum case, and Grand Faux enamel dial. It was made from 2000 through 2004, 500 pieces total, with an extraordinary radial Roman numeral dial with that lovely red 12. You can see that this is old school enamel construction, as a separate disc of enamel is used for the sub-seconds. It's not simply lacquered over and coated over the two surfaces the way it would be if this were a lacquer. This is real fired enamel on a dial whose base is solid gold. The hands are lovely fired blue, and you can see they are alpha style at center with a polished center cap and cannon pinion. This is as good as it gets. A lustrous, bottomless, glossy, ageless style. Enamel is beautiful because it always looks like wet paint with a lovely glossy gleam. It never tarnishes, oxidizes, or shows the effect of age. Now I'm going to hack the seconds. Did you see that right there? The Saxomat caliber? It 0 resets when you hack the seconds. So watch the seconds hand. Boom. It's zeroed out. Now you can set the watch precisely to a reference time. The movement is everything you expect from a Lange. The Saxomat caliber L921, work started on it in 1992. It was the first movement that Lange started working on in 92, hence caliber 921. 3/4 style rotor. Take a look at the refinement here. The rotor itself is made of 21 karat gold. It's double finished. It has a black polished cap at center. It features 5 fired blue screws that are holding a platinum mass in place. That is a platinum mass on a gold rotor. I've never seen this from another brand. 3/4 style bridges, mirrored chamfering on the edge of every bridge, so it has that lovely optically smooth anglage. You can see both fired blue screws and black polished screws, as well as a black polished cap for the escape wheel and the swan's neck mechanism. It is absolutely breathtaking on both sides. A rare Lange watch for which the dial is an aesthetic equal of the movement. 46-hour power reserve, automatic winding, simple platinum pin buckle to match the platinum case, and as you can see, 37 millimeters, a perfect size for a traditional men's dress watch, and the ultimate unisex option if you're a lady with a taste for serious hardware. Now, let's up the ante. Redesigned for 2016, this is the Lange & Söhne Datograph Perpetual, a timepiece that is 41 millimeters. It is 40.9 millimeters if we want to be precise. So that 40.9 millimeter white gold case features a lovely nickel anthracite dial, and the dial, though it is galvanized this dark tone, it is actually made of sterling silver, so you have a silver dial inside a white gold case. It is a perpetual calendar. You need only adjust it in the year 2100. It can handle irregular length months, leap years, all of that, not a problem. It is also a flyback chronograph, so not just a chronograph, but a flyback chronograph that can be reset and restarted with the single push of the trigger. It has an adjustment system that allows you to adjust everything in sync. If the watch should stop, you can use the crown, pull it out, start adjusting with the trigger, and those two controls allow you to move everything in steps. So the day, the date, the month, the leap year, all of that, right, as well as the moon phase, we should count that as well. All of that will move forward in sync. So if the watch should fall behind 5 days because you haven't been running it, you simply click 5 times and everything moves forward. No need to correct the counters individually. The timepiece features a solid gold moon phase disc. Right here, the moon phase disc is made of 22 karat white gold, and the movement, caliber L9521, is the industry standard for beauty in a caliber. Column wheel, black polished, both black polished and fired screws. German silver bridges in nickel copper zinc, with that copper giving it a golden hue rather than the silvery rhodium-plated brass of Swiss watches. Note the freehand engraved balance cock with a black polished swan's neck on top, an overcoil hairspring, an enormous balance, free sprung, beating away at 18,000 vibrations per hour, multiple jewels set in chaton, pocket watch style, satin on the top of the steel chronograph levers, and then mirrored beveling on the edge. You can see just how much black polish there is across this movement. And then you can see those glasuta stripes rippling perfectly aligned across the bridges, the mirrored anglage on the edges, and I'll do my best to show that, and then the engine turning on the base plate. This is best in the world, and impressively, it is a loomed watch, so you can read it at night. Throw it on my wrist. The roughly 41 millimeter case is perfect. Substantial, it has presence, it insists, but it insists with manners. This is gorgeous, and this is the best watch I've got to show you on the program today. Time out, Tim out. Remember, if you like what you see, reach out to me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, and thanks for logging on.